In today's episode, we talk about the Safe Youth Zone initiative. The Safe Youth Zone initiative was first launched as a collaboration between LA County Sheriff's Department, LA County Fire Department, and the City of Long Beach. The program focuses on helping the youth in danger of human trafficking or abuse, and the goal is to prevent young people from returning to unsafe places where they may be experiencing abuse, neglect, or exploitation. Sergeant Jeffrey Walker from the LA County Sheriff's Department, currently assigned to the Los Angeles Human Trafficking Task Force, talks about the beginning of the Safe Youth Zone initiative and why it is important for other LA County departments to join in the initiative.
Well, it started way back in 2012 with Supervisor Don Kanabe, and there was a couple of probation officers that briefed him on the presence of commercially sexually exploited children on our streets. And he was astounded by it. He was just floored. And then from that moment, there was just a resolve that this was not going to happen to our children in our streets. And that's when the county departments started banding together.
Why do you think the Safe Youth Initiative tries to include other county departments, and why is it important for those departments to be on board with this initiative?
So the initiative was started because many of those children will not feel safe not necessarily feel safe, will feel apprehensive going to a sheriff's station or a police station for fear of being criminalized. We had to open more doors to them. It was critical that it not just be law enforcement. It had to be other places so they could go in and seek resources. So it was decided that every county building would be open to them. Every fire station would be open to them. Every hospital would be open to them. Especially any county building that's open in 24-hour operation would be open to them to go and feel safe.
Can you share some of the signs to look for when trying to identify a young person that may be experiencing a hard time, abuse, neglect, or even possibly be a victim of human trafficking?
Some of the things you're going to look for are fresh injuries. You'll look for tattoos, namely crowns, namely diamonds, and money signs. You'll look for a kid who probably hasn't slept in a couple of days, that looks physically exhausted, looks anxious, looking around in panic that somebody could be after him or her. They're going to be initially uncooperative. They may just be fleeing something, and they may want to leave. Once they have an established safety zone around them, then they might want to leave, and then it'll be up to that county worker to try to urge them to stay put and wait for resources to come.
Can you share with us a quick story from your task force highlighting the importance of being vigilant when it comes to youth that may possibly be in danger?
There was a survivor. She's an adult now, but she remembered a random thing where she was in a hospital. Not sure if it was a county hospital, but she was in a hospital, and a nurse had been trained to see these symptoms. And the nurse could have just kept on going with her nursing duties and not pursued anything any further. But then she took the extra effort of, you know what, I'm going to report this. I think there's something going on here. And so she reported it to law enforcement. They came out and talked to her. And from then on, they happened to be at the right place at the right time. And that's what you have to understand about these victims, is for them to disclose abuse, everything has to line up. And 9 times out of 10, it won't. That particular day, she had had enough. And so she wasn't going to go out and say, I'm being trafficked. But she was basically calling out with her eyes, like, something's going on here. Somebody needs to notice me without me saying it. But if somebody asks me, I'll tell them. And that nurse said, I'm going to ask. And she asked. And then that survivor just opened up like the floodgates opened. And she just started disclosing. And that started the ball to her healing. And it was all because that nurse took a little bit of extra time to say there's something else going on here beyond physical injuries that I'm treating in a medical environment.
Now that we've heard a little bit of the history of the Safe Youth Zone initiative, let's talk about how other county departments are informing the public that their offices are now considered safe youth zones. Sandra Maldonado-Aviles, a clinical social worker chief one with the Department of Health Services, shares with us what her department is doing to promote the Safe Youth Zone initiative with their employees and the public.
I'm the sponsor for the Safe Youth Zone initiative at Rancho Los Amigos. We are supporting this initiative by being a safe place for youth who need immediate assistance, especially those youth in potentially threatening situations, including human trafficking and abuse. Often, youth in these situations have no place to go for help. As a result, they remain or return to unsafe settings where they are subjected to continued exploitation, trafficking, and abuse.
Is the Department of Health Services training and preparing its employees so they can identify youth in possible need of help?
To educate our staff about the Safe Youth Zone and what to do if they identify someone in need of help, DHS has created a virtual training. This training is mandatory for all DHS staff. Our campuses have also posted signage identifying our locations as a safe youth zone. We hope these efforts will help us provide support and safe spaces for youth facing potentially threatening situations.
So far, we've heard from LA County Sheriff's Department as well as the Department of Health Services. But what about the Department of Public Social Services, better known as DPSS? Are they joining other county departments in this initiative? DPSS Public Information Assistant Sebastian Cervantes shares with us how DPSS is letting the public know their offices are now considered safe youth zones.
DPSS is getting the word out to media, getting the word out to community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, to help us inform the public of our safe youth zones at public offices. And we can identify these offices by locating the yellow safe youth signs. And we have trained liaisons and trained staff to assist any youth walking in needing assistance.
Let's talk about the liaisons a little bit. Have they been trained on what signs to look for and what's next when encountering a young person that may be in trouble?
The DPSS liaisons are trained to identify by noticing any warning signs on a youth. And once they evaluate and have this discussion with the youth, they are permitted and trained to get in contact with law enforcement or any type of emergency services, whether it be dialing 911 or the Child Protective Hotline for any signs of child abuse. And they are taken to a safe space in the designated office. Meanwhile, the first responders arrive.
Denisse Marquez, a Human Services Administrator 1 with DPSS, describes how liaisons have been trained to spot young people that may be experiencing troubling times.
The Safe Youth Zone liaisons participated in an informational training where we were presented with a PowerPoint and were informed about the Board of Supervisors motion to expand the Safe Youth Zone to other departments. We were provided with a quick reference guide to help us quickly navigate the process of identifying youth at risk and taking immediate action. We were also providing with existing policy regarding things like injury and illness prevention, trafficking and crime victims assistance program, and the domestic violence policy. In addition to that, all the liaisons and all the staff attended an online training, which consisted of the Safe Youth Zone initiative video, where we learned about the initiative and heard real-life stories of former trafficked and exploited youth. After we received the general training in our individual offices, we held a meeting and training session with our staff, our supervisors and our staff during our general staff meeting. And as liaisons, we provided instruction to them both verbally and in writing, and it consisted of step-by-step instruction from the moment that the youth walks in to the moment that we provide and connect them to the right resource. So we coached our staff to be attentive to any unaccompanied youth walking into our office and be proactive if a youth were to ask about the Safe Youth Zone signs that we have located outside and inside of the building. Some of the things that we asked our staff to pay attention to are things like signs of abuse or neglect, such as bruises or branding or scarring, or signs of substance abuse interference or like runaway homeless characteristics, such as unkept or unwashed clothing. And also to pay attention to the youth's communication style. So, for example, if they seem afraid to answer a question or they appear agitated, or maybe there's like conversation that seems scripted, things of that nature. Like they mentioned in the video, look for what is not being said. And the primary goal of it all is to get the youth into a safe space, evaluate for imminent threat in case law enforcement needs to be notified, and further connect the youth to the appropriate source, such as the LA County Child Protection Services.
How is your office making it a welcoming environment for the youth asking for help?
At our office, we've identified a safe room to take the youth once we've identified them. And once they're there, the goal is to keep the youth feeling safe and comfortable. We want to ask them basic questions such as their name and provide a welcoming and trusting environment. So right now we have things like snacks and water available for them. and working on getting a little boutique with like blankets, clothes, and shoes in case they need to change, just to help them feel comfortable, because we don't know what they've been through. And sometimes our county offices or our department DPSS may be the last door on the block for them. And so we need to be ready to listen and to act quickly.
Now, why do you think it's important for DPSS to join other county departments in creating a safe youth zone?
I love this question because I think joining efforts in general is one of the most important pieces when it comes to providing services to our community. I think it's imperative for the different departments within the county and even across counties and states to merge the gap, to communicate and collaborate to provide comprehensive services to our customers. At DPSS, we're a hub for like physiological needs, such as food and shelter, and also for safety needs, such as health and employment. So it's important to work in concert to ensure that people's most basic human needs are met, especially when we're talking about vulnerable populations such as our youth.
Now, as a manager of a social services district office, how do you keep your staff motivated and remind them of how important the role is when serving the public?
As a public servant, as a leader, but most importantly, as a human being, something that I live by and something that I try to instill in our office staff. It's this quote that I heard by Albert Pike, and it says, "What we do for ourselves dies with us. What we do for others and the world remains and is immortal." And this goes to say we make a difference and we impact people's lives. We never know who we're going to come across, what child is going to come through our doors, and we're going to change their lives, right? We're going to improve the quality of their life.
Now we go back to Sergeant Walker to remind us of how important it is to be vigilant at work.
I would encourage all county workers to be curious, to ask those additional questions. Don't be dissuaded if your answer is met with hostility or resistance, because it's going to happen. But you never know. You might change the life of that one person because you met her or him on the right day at the right time and they were ready to leave, and you could be the conduit to make that happen.
If you suspect a child is being victimized, call 911 or the LA County Child Protection Hotline at 1-800-540-4000. That number, once again, is 1-800-540-4000.